Hello, Brian Cottrell here with RecordingFreaks.com. I just got to experience the thrill of going to Sun Studio in Memphis to record. You know, that place where this little thing called rock and roll was created, where visionary Sam Phillips recorded Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, Carl Perkins, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, and Charlie Rich. Where the first rock and roll song, Rocket 88, was recorded by Ike Turner and Jackie Brenston. That's Sun Studio. I've had a long-time dream to go and record at Sun Studio. When I was a kid growing up, my parents were always playing Elvis, Johnny Cash, and other 50s rock. I'm sure that had a big influence on me as some of the first music I ever heard. Sam Phillips was a pioneer and a trailblazer who had problems getting white radio to play the blues artists he was recording. And then one day, his secretary and office manager, Marion Keisker, recorded this guy off the street named Elvis, and the rest is history. So recording at Sun Studio has always been a bucket list item for me, and really a pilgrimage to go back to where it all started. I've spent so much of my life consumed by rock and roll, playing the records, playing guitar, and writing songs. It meant a lot to me to go back to what may be the most important room in the history of rock and roll. My wife bought me a gift certificate for some studio time at Sun. So I talked to my friends, Bob Workman, John Farmer, and Dave Mara, about going there to record. And we originally planned to go in 2020, but that fell apart when the pandemic hit. So finally we got to reschedule and go and record in April of 2023. I wrote some rockabilly songs for the trip. I picked 2 of those to be recorded at Sun, 3 Kisses Tonight, and Get on This Train. We made the decision to not take any of our own instruments and use the guitars and drums at Sun Studio. They have a gear list online on their website, and they have some high-quality gear at the studio. We already had 4 guys in an SUV with our luggage, so it was nice to not have to haul drums and guitars on the trip. We made a 12-hour drive to Memphis, and the next day we visited some music stores, ate some barbecue, went on the Sun Studio tour, and later that evening we went in to record. Sun Studio is a museum and tourist attraction in the daytime and a recording studio at night. I highly recommend taking the tour. The studio really hasn't changed much since Sam was using it. Some of his original gear isn't there anymore, but they have a lot of period-correct replacements of the same make and model number. There's a live tour guide that takes you upstairs and downstairs through the studio, and they do a great job of really giving you a sense of what it was like in the 1950s there in the studio that was originally called Memphis Recording Service. In addition to all the legendary 50s artists that recorded there, in later years, many other artists would record there, like U2, Maroon 5, The Stray Cats, Def Leppard, Marty Stewart, Bonnie Raitt, Paul Simon, Matchbox 20, Tom Petty, and so many more. The recording session started at 7 p.m., and there is parking directly behind the studio. As you walk into Sun through the back doors, you get to see the control room of the recording studio for the first time. They do not allow people in the control room during the tour. The recording room of Sun is not that big, and they still have the same acoustic tiles on the walls and ceiling, and the same floor tile on the floor that was there in the 50s. There's even a small indentation in the floor where Bill Black and Marshall Grant used to stand the end pin of their upright bass to hold it steady. Our engineer for the session was Daniel Crockett, and he was assisted by Lydia Fletcher. Daniel and Lydia were super friendly, very helpful, and welcoming. They really made us feel comfortable for the entire session. They brought us water and made a pot of coffee for everyone, and Daniel already had the drums and mics set up before we got there. The drums were placed near the front of the studio, facing toward the center of the room. Now, these aren't just any drums. These drums were brought to the studio by Larry Mullen Jr. of U2 when they recorded Angel of Harlem, Love Rescue Me, and When Love Comes to Town. and Larry left them there after the session. It's a blue Sparkle Ludwig kit. The drums sounded great in the room and on the recordings, and there was an AKG D112 microphone on the kick drum, not pointed at the hole, but rather pointed near the center of the head. We had asked for a vintage rockabilly sound, and Daniel did a great job of making that happen. There was a Shure SM57 mic below the snare. There was a Granelli Audio Labs modified SM57 with a 90-degree bend on top of the snare. There was an RCA 44 ribbon mic being used for the drum overheads. This mic looks really giant when you get up close to it. There was a Neumann U87 mic in the middle of the room, just picking up the entire room. There was a vintage Fender Deluxe Tweed amp for the guitar, and it was mic'd using an RCA 77 ribbon mic. I had bought a way huge Aquapass echo pedal to use, but Daniel recommended the tape echo in the control room to be used instead. For the first song, I played a Gibson ES225 that was one of the many guitars sitting on stands at Sun. I played a Gibson ES335 on the second song. Daniel had an Electro Voice RE20 mic set up to record the vintage K upright bass when we were tracking live. The K bass had gut strings on it, was very easy to play, and we had no issues with it. Before the session, Daniel and I had discussed there would be a lot of noise in the room, and we would want to recut the upright bass tracks by themselves after the band was done. This ended up being a great decision because later, when we were listening to the tracks back, the drums and the guitar amp were extremely loud on the upright bass mic in the room. When we recorded the upright bass alone, Daniel used an RCA 44 ribbon mic as the close mic and a Neumann TLM mic as the room mic. We used the upright bass at Sun for the first song and then used an electric Fender Precision bass for the second song. That bass was recorded direct with no amp. We sang all the vocals into a vintage Shure 55 mic. For preamps, Daniel used a Universal Audio 610 preamp with a Spectrasonics compressor limiter for the electric bass and vocals. He used the RCA 76D console preamps for the upright bass and guitar amp. This is the same model console that Sam Phillips used at Sun. It has 5 channels on it. They're all tube preamps. A Universal Audio Twinfinity 710 preamp was used for the drums. There was a vintage Ampex 350 reel-to-reel tape machine in the room that was used for a slapback echo. That machine ran throughout the entire session, and once during the session, they had to stop and start the tape over when it ran out of tape. Daniel was helpful throughout the session. He was patient with us and helped us to get the best takes that we could get, but he also helped to keep us on schedule to get the songs recorded in the amount of time we had scheduled. We recorded both songs live. It took us 4 or 5 takes for each song to get a take we were happy with. And then we started overdubbing: upright bass, vocals, and guitar. While we were happy with our live tracks, this would give us a lot more options at mixdown. Daniel recorded us into Pro Tools and made us rough mixes of the songs, and we drank a few beers and relaxed and enjoyed the atmosphere at Sun. The tracks were uploaded to a file-sharing website called WeTransfer.com, where they would be available for a week to allow me to download them before they disappeared. After I got back home from the trip, I downloaded those to my hard drive and imported them into Pro Tools. I didn't want to do too much artificial processing on them, as I wanted them to be somewhat genuine in the way tracks would have been recorded in the 50s. I used a little bit of compression on most of the tracks and a little bit of EQ here and there. In the end, I decided not to use most of the reel-to-reel tape slapback echo. It was extremely noisy, and the quality of the recorded sound was somewhat erratic. Instead, I created my own by making a duplicate of the tracks and then offsetting it by about 90 milliseconds in Pro Tools. I took a little bit of the high end off of the echo so it wouldn't be as bright as the original signal and would be somewhat similar to tape-recorded echo. There are YouTube videos on my Brian Cottrell musician channel, that show the final mixes of the songs and some of the recording process. The songs will also be released to all streaming and download services by my band, Dream Trippers.
All right, you're rolling when you're ready.
Give me 1, 2, 3 kisses tonight. Show me your sweet smile. Hold me tight. Give me 4, 5, 6 songs to dance with you. Now give me a 1, 2, 3 kisses tonight.
Get out of the way or get on this train, we're coming through. Get out of the way or get on this train, it's up to you. We're moving fast, get off the tracks, decide what you wanna do. Get out of the way or get on this train, we're coming through.
We had a fantastic day at Sun Studio that I'll never forget. For someone like me who spent their entire life obsessed by rock and roll music, it was somewhat overwhelming being in that room and feeling the vibe. If I had anything to do over again, I probably would have taken my own guitar, as the action of the guitars that I tried at Sun were an issue for me. The action on 4 different guitars that I played, and these were all electrics, the action was much higher than the action of any of my acoustic guitars at home. I'm thrilled with the recordings, and you can really hear the sound of the room at Sun and their vintage mics on those songs. Thanks so much to Daniel and Lydia for a great recording experience. It was an incredible day I'll never forget. In addition to recordingfreaks.com, don't forget to check me out on my musician website, briancottrell.com, and my musician YouTube channel, Brian Cottrell. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Have a good day.